Hello, friends. Gregg Braden here. Welcome to this edition of our questions and answers, our Q&A. I want to welcome you to our channel if you're new to the channel, and if you are a returning viewer, I want to thank you for all your love and support. We appreciate you. As I mentioned in the last video, I've been traveling extensively in live events. I'm responsible for my own content. If I'm not here, I'm not creating it. So they have been a bit fewer and further between in the last few weeks. And I'm happy to be in the studio now at just outside of Santa Fe, New Mexico, here in our little studio where I get to create this content. And I'm bringing to you the answers to questions that have come in over the last few weeks. And this is really interesting to me because the questions, they kind of come in cycles. So over the mid-January into early February, all the questions, not everyone, but the majority, were all about finance, blockchain technology, Bitcoin. Is it safe? What are your thoughts after the collapse of FTX? Is this the end of crypto? And I've answered those in all the ways that I have. If you didn't see the other videos, please check them out. They're in the links below. This week, what's interesting is no questions about blockchain. They're all more spiritually oriented questions about us and our relationship to the changes and to the world. And I'd like to address a couple of those. One of those, well, this is a really interesting one. One of these comes from Andy. And once again, as I always do, I'm not going to share the last name to protect your privacy. Andy, I want to thank you at 10:40 a.m. for writing this question to me. We had been talking in some of the online free webinars and things like that about the fact that all the answers already exist, all the big problems, the technological answers already exist to the big problems in the world today, and they have for a long time. Energy, finance, agriculture, medical technologies. We've had the technologies, a lot of them simply have not been shared in the mainstream. So the question is, what would be the impact on individuals if these technologies roll out on a large scale? It's a really good question. We know that technologies are being suppressed, and they have been, probably as long as humans have had the technologies, because some of the new technologies make obsolete entire industries that we have today. And there are people heavily invested in these industries. They don't want them to go away. But I'll tell you, I know firsthand, I'll just tell you a quick story. I know firsthand about the suppression of these technologies. And the first time I saw it, I was surprised. I was a budding young computer geologist in the 1970s during the first energy crisis, when the energy oil was cut off from the Middle East into the West. And we had to find our own sources of energy, our own sources of oil. And we began exploring the North Slope, Alaska, Prudhoe Bay, and the tremendous reserves in North Slope, Alaska. Well, it was during that time, and some of you may remember this, they rationed gasoline to 10 gallons per person per week. This is the 1970s. I got to tell you, the automobiles in the 1970s, we were still living, many of them were developed in the late 1960s. They were called muscle cars. So beautiful Mustang GTs, Pontiac GTOs, Camaro Trans Ams, Pontiac Trans Ams. These were not gasoline efficient vehicles. They were beautiful and fun. They were not efficient. And so 10 gallons a week wouldn't get you very far, especially if you're driving that vehicle every day back and forth to work, back and forth to school, as I was. 1969 Pontiac GTO, beautiful machine. So one of the things I discovered when I began working in the energy industry was that a carburetor had been developed that would allow the vehicle that this carburetor was placed into to get 90 miles to the gallon in 1970s. So if you can imagine these muscle cars getting 90 miles to the gallon, then the carburetor, the technology was pretty straightforward. And so the question is, where's that carburetor? How come we didn't use it? Why didn't we start saving gas? Well, that would not be good for the energy companies because people needed the energy. So the patent for that carburetor was purchased by an oil company, and they kept that patent under wraps. So that carburetor was never, to my best of my knowledge, this day, if we get 50 miles a gallon, we still think that's good. And that's with little cars that are made of They're made of essentially fiberglass, very lightweight, not the big heavy vehicles. So we still don't have that technology. So I saw that happen firsthand, and that really opened my eyes to the possibility that technology could be suppressed like that. And then as I worked in the industry, from the energy industry into the defense industry, and the physics and the physicists working with sources of energy, became very clear that we have had the ability to produce clean, green, sustainable energy for at least 70 years. And that technology has not been shared as well. And there are a lot of reasons for that. So the question that's being asked here is, while we have small examples, scientists come on YouTube and say, I've got a free energy device that'll, run your house. And a few people use that. So the question is, what would happen on a large scale if these technologies roll out on a bigger scale? Well, it's a really good question. One of the first things that would happen would be the fulfillment of the possibility that I have mentioned in so many of my videos, and that is the fact that we have everything we need to raise the standard of living for every child, every man, every woman on the face of the earth, and every nation that wants to have a higher standard of living, and to do so without negatively impacting the resources, our economy, the earth. We could do that. And one of the first pushbacks that I get is, what about the number of people? There's so many people. If we just keep having more and more people, and that people have easier and easier and better lives, where does that end? Well, the answer to that question is in another YouTube video. Put the link down below. The statistics are frightening when it comes to human population. We are in trouble here on planet Earth. A lot of people don't believe that, and they don't see it because they're not seeing it immediately in their own backyard. Here's what's happening. In 1970s, there was a book called The Population Bomb, Paul Ehrlich. Many of you remember this. I read it, when I was in school back in the 1970s. That painted a very dark picture of human population continuing to grow on a geometric scale, off the charts, devouring all of the resources of the earth, creating a lot of suffering, a lot of pain, and just an apocalyptic view of our future. Of course, that didn't happen in the way that he envisioned, because there were things he didn't take into account. Number one, he didn't take new technologies into account that change the way resources are being used in the 1970s. But number two, we are not going to just continue to create a larger and larger and larger population. As I describe in the video, in the link down below, it was released a few weeks ago. What the statistics are showing is that the fertility rates of the human species on a global level has fallen off a cliff. It is dropping like a rock. And there are a lot of reasons for that. One of those reasons is global stress. We are stressed in ways that we have never experienced stress before, for periods of time lasting longer. And typically the stress will be around a natural disaster, or the possibility of a war, and then events happen so that we know one way or another where we're going. And what's happening right now is we don't know. We have so much uncertainty in our world and in our lives on so many different levels: finances, economies, jobs, national sovereignty, national security, climate. I mean, just on and on. So it has created a perpetual stress that apparently is taking a toll on global fertility rates. But even beyond that, and I'm going to be a little redundant. If you haven't seen the other video, I just want to share some of the statistics with you here. Male sperm counts are on the decline. They have been for the last 40 years or so. When they do the global sperm counts, 1995-ish, they measure sperm in millions per milliliter. And the number was about 95 million sperm per milliliter, which is a good number. Those numbers started to drop. And by the time 2021 was the last global census of sperm on the planet, we've gone from 95 million per milliliter down to right around 40, and possibly even below 40 million per milliliter. And if that number sounds familiar to any of you out there that are trying to conceive, if you're going to fertility clinics, you're probably familiar with this number. 40 million borderlines on low sperm count where it's difficult to conceive. And the indications are we're going to continue to drop. We're dropping below that 40 million. And a lot of it is due to environmental toxins. Our environment is laden with what are called anti-androgens, androgens, the sex hormones for both men and women. So the toxins, including BPA, and all the ways that it's showing up, everything from women's cosmetics and shampoos and lotions to the products that men are using as well, to the way we soften plastics and the drinking water bottles that we all are accustomed to when we're traveling, and many other places. The linings inside of cooking utensils that make them less sticky. All of these things are contributing to this. We now are below the replacement rate. 2.1 babies per human woman is what we need to make to just steady the population. We have dropped below that. Now more people are dying. Certainly wars are contributing to this. So we've dropped below the replacement rate. More people are dying that are being born. So right now, if we continue like we are right now, population tops out at about 10 billion. We're at 8 billion now, tops out about 10 billion in the year 2050. And if something doesn't change, we're on a really, I mean, it's like, it's not a gradual decline. It's like off the cliff. So our species is in trouble right now. A lot of people don't want to talk about it. A lot of people are not aware of it. So when it comes to technology, this is why this is important, because if the thinking is, if we make life better for everyone and we keep making more people, where does it end? You know, it's going to be crazy and there won't be enough to go around. That is thinking, false thinking based on the false assumptions of obsolete science from another era. We've got the technology right now. We have the space, we have the land, we have the water, we have the know-how. And I identify all this with statistics in the video that's referenced down below. So what would happen on a larger scale is that we would raise the standard of living for the people that are living with us now. And when we do that, when we free people from survival, they're not struggling just to get by. And if their babies are healthier with greater cognitive abilities and less stress than the babies undergoing in the world right now, now what we're doing is contributing to our information pool, to our imagination pool, to our innovation pool, because that's our nature to create and innovate. It's hard not to. This is what it means to be human. We are innovative by nature. And our innovation is crushed when we are stuck in survival and when we're suffering. So my opinion, I think we would see a really beautiful world of people who are much happier because they've raised the standard of living. Crime rates would drop because the discrepancies between the haves and the have-nots would be much less pronounced. I think we will always have that discrepancy unless we live in a regulated dystopian kind of world where everybody is doled out the same thing and can't use more, can't use less, and is highly controlled. I don't think we want that. That steals our freedom and our creativity and our imagination. So I believe that by sharing the new technologies, and what are we talking about? We're talking about energy, in my opinion, the energy that is available to us that is the product of the world we live in. And I'm talking about energy on the Planck scale. This is the field around us. This is an energy that has to be made. I mean, think about this. Most energy today is made by either burning or destroying something and capturing the energy of the burning or the destroying or the explosion or whatever it is. You know, your gasoline powered automobiles, those are little tiny explosions that are happening in the cylinders driving the pistons of your car. Something has to be ignited, you know, or burned or something like that. Planck scale energy doesn't have to be that way at all. Our universe is made of vibratory strings of energy on a very, very small scale called the Planck scale and below, after Max Planck. And it is possible to harmonize devices with those Planck scales. There are physicists that are doing that now. The technology exists. It has been suppressed, and that's changing. And even if we don't do that, I've talked to you about other forms of base load energy, like thorium, the element number 90 on the periodic table. that produces zero greenhouse gases, is abundant in the Earth's crust, it's inexpensive to produce, cannot be weaponized like uranium and plutonium can. It can't melt down like a Fukushima reactor. We've had that for 70 years. We could use that as a stepping stone, as a bridge. I've talked about that in other videos. That link is down below as well. So this is a long answer to a short question. What would happen on a large scale? A large scale, we would be healthier, we would be happier, we would have more freedom for greater creativity, for more imagination, for more innovation. In essence, we would have a greater opportunity to dream bigger dreams. You know, our ancestors have always told us that this world is an illusionary world, that we're living a dream. And when we sleep at night, it's a dream within the dream. So if this is a dream, everything we create is a part of our dream. And if we'd like a better world, we need to dream a higher dream. And when we're not struggling for survival, we feel strong and healthy and happy, and we're not afraid of our neighbor. We're not afraid to lock our doors and bury ourselves from the outside world because those people are suffering in ways that we are not. Sharing the technology would create that kind of a world. It would also decentralize the power structures. And what that means is that people who are in power and control, elites in power and control right now, they would lose that power and control. And they are fighting to keep that. Now, what they don't know is that they would have more opportunities, not for power and control, but they would have more opportunities to contribute, and in those contributions, to create the world that we're talking about, and they would benefit tremendously without causing the suffering from a world that we are being taught is based in lack and scarcity and competition and conflict. We would see business models based upon cooperation and abundance. Now think about that. The business models that we see right now are based on Darwinian ideas. There's not enough to go around. So somebody's got something somebody else needs, and they're going to charge as much as they can for that. That is an economy based upon scarcity and lack. What would it mean to have an economy based upon abundance and cooperation, where you say, you know, you've got something that I need, and the person that has that says, you know, I would be so happy to be able to share with you some of this abundance, and you've got some things that I need. It's almost like global bartering. And I've seen this work in indigenous communities on smaller scales where no money is involved. Everybody's got everything they need. If the energy that powers our economy were made abundant, and if it were made free because it exists in nature, it takes technology to capture it, certainly, and it takes technology to distribute it, certainly, and there are ways to compensate for that. But if we made this kind of energy accessible, that means we would have banking for almost 2 billion of the world's population that are considered to be unbanked right now. They would have financial resources that they've never had before, and they would have the sovereignty and the freedom to exercise those financial resources in ways that are responsible for themselves and their families. So the benefits just go on and on. It's a good question. We're in the midst of the change right now. It's not like it's going to happen. We're in it. The only way out of it is to go through it. And we don't know what's on the other end because you and I are creating it. So when we think about the world and what is possible, if we can think in terms of abundance and cooperation rather than lack and scarcity, and if we can think of how can we in our everyday lives make life better for the next person. I know it's a very different way of thinking. I've talked about this in some of our videos. For example, every time I jump onto the freeway to go down to the airport from my rural community, and there are other cars that are on that on-ramp trying to get on the freeway, I make it my job to make sure that everyone in front of me gets on safely and has a safe start on that freeway. They may not be thinking about me that way, but it's my way of helping my brothers and sisters on the road that morning have a good day instead of a bad day. And it's little things like that that change the way we think about ourselves and our relationship to the world. So that's why I'm going to answer that first question. The second question kind of ties into this. And this is a question from Nicole. Nicole, thank you for your question. She says, does changing our perceptions genuinely change what we see in ourselves and others? kind of ties into what I just said about jumping onto the freeway, how I feel about myself and how I feel about my brothers and sisters doing the same thing. What we're talking about when we talk about perceptions, it's the way we've been taught to think about ourselves. It's called our story. Many of you have heard in the live events, I talk about our story extensively because the term story kind of sounds airy-fairy to many people. It sounds like a philosophical, abstract concept. What I want you to know is that you and I live our lives based upon our story. Our story is the way we've been taught to think about ourselves. Every problem, every moment, and every day of our lives, we solve based upon the way we think about our relationship to the world. Every relationship that we have ever had in our lives, from our friends to our jobs, our careers, our businesses, to our most intimate relationships, people we invite into our homes, into our lives, the people we invite into our bed, they are all based upon our perceptions of ourselves, our value, our sense of worth, our relationship to the world at large. The way we heal our bodies is based upon our story. The way we choose our politics is based upon our story. This shows up in elections all the time. The policies that we embrace, the laws that we enact, the societies that we build, they're all based upon our story. So you can see where our story is more than an abstract concept. It's the foundation of everything. I mean, there's nothing in your life right now that you can identify that is not related to your story and the way you think about yourself. So all of a sudden, the story is front and center. It's the foundation of everything. So Nicole, your question is right on. It's a really good one. Does changing our perception change the way we see ourselves? Does changing our perception change our story? And the answer is absolutely yes. And it does it on a number of different levels. At the most fundamental level, on the atomic and the molecular level of our bodies, what the best science of the modern world is showing us is that the non-physical perceptions that we have, our sense of safety and well-being, do we feel safe or do we feel threatened in the world? Those perceptions trigger feelings and emotions in our heart that directly link to and send information to the brain, so the brain can send the chemistry into the body that reflects our perception of the world. So if we're feeling threatened in the world, our heart will send a signal to the brain that says, scary world, I'm not safe. Brain will start producing chemistry to help protect us and give us what we need so we can act quickly if we need to. It'll higher levels of adrenaline, stress hormones like adrenaline and cortisol. And it will shut down other functions in the body like repair and regeneration so that that energy can be placed into what we perceive we need to make us safe in the world. Fight or flight is a part of that. So it begins on that level. These are epigenetic triggers. Epigenetics is the ability to change the genetic expression through factors that are above the genetic level. So nutrition, diet, exercise, those are all epigenetic factors. We know that. The most powerful is our perceptions because it creates the emotion and triggers the chemistry in the body. So yes, when we change our perceptions of the world, we are actually changing the chemistry of our bodies. I'm just thinking right off the top of my head, there's a very famous quote. Daniel Newberg is a neurophysicist, and I believe I got his first name right. I didn't know I was going to say this, so I don't have it in front of me. His last name is Newberg, and he is a neurophysicist, a neuroscientist. He is a neuroscientist. And what he says is that changing one word in our vocabulary has the ability to upregulate or downregulate a gene at the genetic level through fear and stress. So just the way we choose to use a single word can change our genetic expression, can upregulate for a stronger immune response, or if we are telling ourselves we live in a scary world, it can downregulate and make us, our immune system takes a hit from that because the energy is going somewhere else. So we have those abilities, our perceptions, the way we think about ourselves. It's where everything begins. It even ties in to the first question that Andy asked, because The solutions that we choose to the problems in the world will be based upon our story and the way we think about ourselves. Another way of saying this is when we change the way we think about ourselves and our relationship to the world, those changes will be reflected in the kinds of solutions that we choose. So it makes a lot of sense. I think our biggest challenge, rather than imposing a lot of change on the world, with us continuing to think the way we've been thinking, for a century or two. And this is where a lot of the struggle comes from, because people are saying, okay, we're being forced to change, but they're still thinking in the old way. So the change doesn't make any sense. However, if we fundamentally shift the thinking and the feelings and the perceptions and change our priorities, make it a priority to preserve cherished human values like freedom, like innovation, like the ability to have sovereignty in our lives over our own finances, over our own bodies. Those are fundamental values that are reflected then in the choices that we make of the kinds of technologies that we embrace. So without knowing it, possibly what Nicole has just asked is actually the foundation and the key to solving the greatest problems that we face today. It's a problem of thinking. Once we shift let me just give you a perfect example. United Nations statistics tell us very clearly that there is no food shortage on planet Earth. We have all the food we need to feed every mouth of every woman, every man, every child, everywhere on the face of the earth. We have the food. What is missing is the leadership that makes it a priority for that food to get to the places that it's needed when it is needed. And when I talk about leadership, I'm not talking necessarily about governments or America or Europe, or I'm not talking about, leaders that we're seeing in news. You and I are leaders. It's about human priorities. When we as a society, when we as a civilization choose to make human life, to honor the sanctity of human life and what human life really means. There's a whole conversation, it's in another video. When we really embrace that, what it means to be human, when we allow for human life to take priority and to take precedence over economics, for example, then we will begin to make the choices that support and reflect those values. And you will see that the food that we have in one place of the world will find its way to the mouths that need it in another place in the world. We're blessed. Right now, UN says at least for 50 years, we've got food security, barring a black swan event. And if a comet, or a meteorite slams into the earth, or there's a nuclear war on the horizon, God forbid, or, a global pandemic that is so bad it lasts for years and shuts everything. I mean, those kinds of things could change those statistics. But right now, we've got all the food we need. The food shortages that you see and the starvations are localized because they've not been made, it has not been made a priority to get food into those people. So that's what I'm going to answer that question. Perceptions are everything. Our thinking is everything. And this is the 40th year I've done this work in one form or another. It's kind of a mind blower. I'm not sure where those 40 years went. And I'm looking forward to being with you for at least that long, if not longer, as we go into this new century. But I think the greatest challenge that we face is to shift the thinking about who we are, what is our potential, what are our capabilities, and what is our relationship to the earth, and what is our relationship to the cosmos. Once we make those shifts that reflect the deep truth of what the best science of the modern world is already showing us, and the science is telling us we're not what we've been told, we're much more than we've been led to believe, we're not what we're teaching our kids in schools. Once we accept what science is telling us, we ask science to tell us who we are. Science is doing a good job. A lot of people don't want the answers that the science is telling us. A lot of scientists won't accept the answers that are being revealed, such as the fact that evolution is not the reason that we are here. Evolution is a fact. In the geologic record, as a geologist, I've seen it. Plants, animals, insects, it breaks down when it comes to humans. We showed up 200,000 years ago. through mysterious mutations that happened pretty much all at the same time, not slowly, gradually over a long period of time, and they're not the product of natural evolution. Scientific papers tell us that. Now they don't know what to do with it, so they don't want to teach it. So once we embrace the story that the evidence leads to, rather than taking the evidence and trying to force it into a pre-existing story that no longer works, once we make that shift, then the thinking will become the foundation that leads to all the things that we're talking about here and solves these problems. It all begins with perceptions. So that's why I'm going to answer that question. I want to thank you for sharing a part of your day with me today. I hope this has been useful. As always, I appreciate click a like if you like it, click a don't like if you don't like it, because we don't all agree on everything, but I'd like to know that you're watching. Feel free to drop me a comment, and I look forward to our next.